Terry kicked us off with the inaugural message from the beginning articles of Stevenson's freshman text, or the beginning of Stevenson's book. I believe I'm hitting on articles 8, 10, and 12 tonight, okay, as we progress through that. So the plan is for the year to go through the freshman text. So, how do we learn? How do you learn stuff? This is gonna be maybe interactive.
Oh.
Maybe.
Okay. By seeing?
By seeing,
Showing up.
Repetition?
touching, repetition, getting it in our head, right?
Hearing.
You remember some things because you heard it, you remember other things because you saw it.
You did it.
The manual makes no sense to me. When my dad was helping me fix the car, when I did it with him, that's when I learned how to work on cars. It was the doing that taught me, right? So, as chiropractors, we study the branches, mainly the main branches of philosophy. Epistemology is one of them. Another big one, because epistemology is how we learn. Another big branch of philosophy is metaphysics, because that's where we have our roots, right? We are a profession based in universal intelligence as an idea, and based in innate intelligence as it resides in living things, and that puts us in the metaphysical realm. So we're strongly anchored in metaphysics. So we can learn, gain knowledge through deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, intuition, instinct, revelation, right? We'll talk about these two tonight. Those are the ones that are big in Articles 8, 10, and 12 of Stevenson. How do you know, just real quickly, how do you know when you learn from these ways? When we hear of intuition, what's the adjective we most frequently associate with that?
Women.
Gut instinct.
Gut instinct, or
Women.
women's intuition, mother's intuition, right? How does mom know to trust that gut instinct?
Cameras.
Test it.
She learned when she went against it, and it didn't work in her
Test it.
favor. Yeah.
Test it. I thought my mother had eyes all over New City, New York. Because I would come home and she would say something, I'm like, how did she know that? But that was her testing it, to test her gut, right, on what I was doing. Instincts are something, typically, if we look at the definition, that pertain to a whole species. Okay? So the migrating geese might be instinctual. The salmon, going back to where they were spawned, might be instinctual, because the whole species does that. So we can learn about that by testing it. Revelation, right? A word from God. How do you know you're hearing from God? I gotta go test it. And so we can learn these ways. But we're gonna focus up here. These have a plan, or let's say a science, to how we could apply them. Most men would rather die than think, and many do. Okay? Bertrand Russell. We don't want to see that in our chiropractic youngsters coming through school today. So define thinking. How would you define that? As parents, we're telling our kids, think. Well, what do you mean? What does that mean? How would you define that?
Process information to make a decision.
Okay, process information to make a decision, right? We want to think. We want the people coming to our office to think. I remember learning from Joe Strauss when I was pretty new out of school into practice, and he would say, I don't want the people in my practice to depend on me for their answers any more than I want them to depend on their medical doctor for their answers. I want them to learn how to think. So that's what we're trying to do. And so I've tried to make a point, having heard that early on, when people come in here, to try to get them to think. Okay? So, processing information so they can apply it. In a world of stability, information is fine. In a world of change, thinking is essential to adapt and change. Careers. Look at your parents' generation and your grandparents' generation. Compare it to our generation. My dad thought I was nuts, right? To leave Texaco Oil to go back to school to be a chiropractor. Because he was a Ford Motor Company man. His generation, you get in with a big company like that, you got it made. What are you doing? Don't you know how many kids your age would love to have your job? And I says, no, but if you know of any, tell them it's available. Right? I was a wise aleck. Right? That wasn't my generation. Well, maybe it wasn't me. What is it for our kids comparing to us? Do we look at what we do as a job? Because a job is different than a vocation. How do we think that through in terms of what we're actually doing? We're certainly entrepreneurial as chiropractors, as well as professional. But in chiropractic, we don't have a hospital system to go into, like the medical doctor does, or even the DO these days. We have to create the entrepreneurial business. So we're kind of over there in that. So it is about information. How much information did our grandparents get? No internet. I still got the big box radio. There's no radio guts in it, but I got the big box, the piece of furniture in our house that used to be my grandmother and grandfather's, where they would sit around the radio and listen to it. All right? Then the TV came along, and now we've got the internet. Back when I was learning how to build my business, I read a business book, which should apply to chiropractors because we have a business. And back in the late 80s, the average person sees 561 ads a day. That's a lot of ads. What is it today? That was pre-internet. So what makes us think our chiropractic ad is going to stand out from 561 other ads? There's a lot of stuff coming at people. A lot of information. How do we help them sort through it and pull out the gems and discard the garbage? That's the tough part. I mean, we got to teach that. It was huge to Grace and I, raising the girls and trying to get them to focus on what's good and trying to get chiropractic students to do the same thing. What is going to be pertinent to your practice? The brain structurally, anatomically, hasn't changed, right? But the information it has to process now has increased by 1,000-fold, or thousands of folds. All processing with this same computer. So, information overloaded, thinking deprived. Are the people coming into our office? I try and hand pick the stuff I hang on the wall to try and educate people, to get them to go look at it, to try and draw their attention to it, to make them think. But what are they doing when they come in your office and mine? Immediately. They sit down and they're looking at their social media. And I'm not able to make them think as much as I used to because it's right there. Now you got to put something on their phone to get them to think. So if you can create it, and you're, playing your music and make your own ads with something. Facebook page, websites, however you can get it out there, we've got to try to get them to think. And it's got to be provocative, right? Or as, the advertisers would say, it's got to be sexy. It's got to be something to pull them in and make them look at what you have to say to make them think. Critical thinking, outcomes, and characteristics. Is this what we're shooting for?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. In our chiropractic message, this is not a medical office. Don't come here looking for medical advice or medical procedures or medical diagnoses. For me. Accuracy. That's our analysis and our adjustment. Right? We just got done in class at Sherman this week talking about the fixation model, and I told the students, you guys are gonna love this fixation model, because the guys that subscribe to this tell you you don't have to precisely locate a vertebra in order to give a meaningful thrust.
Oh, really?
You just gotta get someplace on the spine and get it in motion. 'Cause you should be jumping up out of your seats because you don't know when you're on T6 or T7 in the first place.
Doesn't matter.
Are you on C5 or C2? You don't know. You're hoping you're on the right one. So that should appeal to you, right? And I'm joking around, but isn't that something we want? Precision, relevance. How is my visit to your practice this week relevant to my life this week? Is it only relevant when I'm in pain? Is it only relevant if I can't go to work? How do we sell them on how it's relevant to them? That's a dirty word, that four-letter word sell, right? But that's what we're doing. You sell yourself to your spouse, you get them to like you, right? Or we could say educate, right? How am I educating on the relevance today? That is probably the toughest part. We think it's relevant. They may agree that it's relevant for a while, until they're feeling better, and then all of a sudden they forget to come in for their routine check that you mapped out for them. Depth and completeness of thinking. You're thinking deeper about topics, hence why Dwayne and I in the PSCA were thinking about how do we go deeper into chiropractic philosophy, because we see it as foundational to practice. So, one way to go deeper is to study the book. Okay? Breadth, how wide? How wide does this chiropractic philosophy apply? For tonight, how wide does this deductive or inductive thinking apply to our life? Maybe beyond just our practice. Logical consistency. I like that. It's neat how in a marriage you get opposites a lot of times. And Grace is really, for like the past 8-9 years, on the kick to get a piece of property, some other beach house. Someplace where the whole family can go meet. And she just puts it right out there, this is what we have to do. So then I come over and I say, well, you'd have the taxes, and you'd have the insurance, and you'd have the upkeep, and then we would go here on vacation, and while everybody's at the beach having a good time, I would be over here doing plumbing and painting, and maybe a little bit of, lawn care and stuff like that. I said, I'm not seeing the benefit. Well, why do you have to be so practical? Right? Just let's do it. Just let's do it. Doesn't like my logical questions, my logical approach. But that's been the fun tension of our marriage for 38 years, So, not that she's not logically consistent, she just doesn't like my logic when it doesn't match hers, right? Do you want logical consistency with people?
Yes.
Do people get motivated because things are logical?
No.
Or do they get motivated because of their emotions?
Yes.
Come on, when they open the magazine, whatever magazine they're reading, and the left side, it's a 2-page ad, and the left side is the hook to draw you in, and the right side is all the side effects of the drug that the hook was about. If they were logical, reading these side effects, why are they still taking it? Because they're motivated by the emotion of fear, if they don't, that they're going to die, or they're going to suffer. Okay? So, we got a lot of hard work. How are we going to make it relevant? How are we going to make it, get them to see the logical of it? But at the same time, when we think critically, this will be happening in our practice. And that's a good start. Teaching them that, so that we can see these outcomes might be a little bit tougher. So, if you're a critical thinker, you're humble. You have courage. You have the courage of your convictions. No, I have no problem walking up to somebody and telling them they need a chiropractor even though they're not in pain. They got a nervous system, they have a spine. Integrity. Sticking to what you do, doing it well. Perseverance, simplicity, autonomy, confidence in what you're reasoning about. Am I confident?
A little bit.
We're going to talk about having a high degree of confidence, okay, and how we get there. And this is probably, hopefully, a good refresher for all of us, because we've all been around the block, okay? When we talked about, Dwayne and I met at the Fuddruckers to really plan this and lay this all out several months ago. And the idea was, I know a lot of young chiropractors in Spartanburg struggling to get going. Struggling to get the plane off the ground to where they can coast in the air. And they're not here. And they're being invited. And this is what we want them to have. So we'll keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
We'll keep trying. We named them at dinner, a couple of them that still aren't here. So, you heard something? You saw something? You felt something? You're running it through the filter? The gears are turning? The light comes on. Critical thinking, processing the information, as Chris said, and then applying it. So, Stevenson, Article 8, chiropractic is a deductive science. So that's the one I started off with. Because in the beginning of the book, he says chiropractic is a deductive science. So I've never had a problem talking with somebody who thinks I'm in a cult, because my practice and Sherman College where I work and IFCO or PSCA, the things I'm affiliated with, are based on a philosophical approach to chiropractic. I have no problem saying that it's a deductive science. It's not a religion. It's not a belief system. It's based on deduction. So you're thinking we're not scientific because you want inductive studies about how chiropractic helps X, Y, Z. I'm telling you chiropractic is scientific, but this is where I'm starting with. Now I'm going to eventually get to induction, but this is where I'm starting, if you want to have this conversation. So, what's that, is that Homer Simpson?
Mm-hmm.
The father, right? His brain is small. Gnosis is to know. Right? So an agnostic, like asympathetic, non-sympathetic, or asymptomatic without symptoms, agnostic means you can't know. Gnosis is to know, and epignosis is beyond knowing. The next layer out. What's the epidermis? The outer layer of the skin. Epigenetics, very big happening field in science, which is coming closer to chiropractic thinking, actually, right? Epigenetics is the layer above genes, how the genes actually work. Epignosis is another layer of knowing, right? So here's how I would explain that. I'm an intern at Sherman College. One of my first patients in the health center comes in like this, right? I go through my chiropractic analysis, which in 1985 was NCM, leg checks, x-rays, palpation, fossa readings. I think that was it. Maybe sacral restriction test, okay? Sacral restriction test was awful, right? So I took the x-rays. Why are you x-raying up here when my problem is down here? So I do, my first education was about that. explained to them why, what the rationale was. Little commercial, did you know that the CCE standards preclude students from doing that? If they come in with pain here, you have no reason to x-ray up here. Even if you're a proponent of HIO or Gonstead or whatever else that might want to look at the neck, you can only x-ray here. You have to make a different case, a lot of times stretch the truth, to get an x-ray up here. A technique argument is not enough to get approval for this x-ray. Just part of the game, okay? So I had my x-rays up here. Told them why we were x-raying this instead of this. Because I knew that we were gonna start here. This was our protocol, and if this was clear and there was still problems down here, then I could address those areas, but I had to get this clear first. Okay, I had no problem with that. Adjusted C2, I believe, on this person. Put them in the resting booth, brought them back, did my post-check, graph changed, leg check changed, sacral restriction, legs came up really high, they couldn't hardly, especially the right one, couldn't budge before. Boy, as a first quarter seeing outpatients, adjusting here and seeing this change, my knowledge went from here to there. Now I owned it. That's epignosis. That's going from mere head knowledge to knowing. Knowing knowledge, right? The other one was Grady when I was a student. I'll just tell you this one, it's a good story. As an intern at the health center, remember they used to have the waiting booth in the middle of the health center? Instead of off to the side where the receptionist desk was, and when the doors opened at 1 o'clock, we were in class till 1:15. But the health center opened at 1, and people would come in, a lot of students, a lot of interns, and line up to both receptionists, two receptionists lined out to the door. Earl Taylor's wife Ann was one of the receptionists, and that was back, you guys remember that. And so Grady had come in because he restricted range of motion. He could barely turn when he was backing up his pick-em-up truck. And he had a second shift job every day at 3 o'clock. He always wore blue jeans rolled up with a cuff. He always wore a t-shirt, cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve. In February, that's all he wore. In August, that's all he wore. He wore that every day, the whole year, okay? Took his x-ray, did his whole workup. Okay, we're gonna adjust the atlas. I'm going over his x-ray. Diffuse idiopathic sclerosing hyperexostosis. No reason why a chiropractor should have to know that word, okay? But he had the hot wax drippings running down the neck. Okay, so no wonder why he can't turn his head and neck. But he's got a subluxation at C1. So I adjusted C1, came time for the adjustment, adjusted him, put him in a rest booth, post-check him, sent him home. Come back in 2 days. I come down the stairs, there's Grady in line. I got my big 3-ring binder. I'm gonna go lean it against the wall, that's how you reserve the room, right? That you were gonna get the room next was by putting your book out front. And then I went over to shake Grady's hand in his line and tell him how many people were in front of us and how long it would be before I could check him. So I went over to say, hey Grady, and he comes out of line and he gives me this big hug. That was before I was into hugging men, okay? And Grady says, that adjustment, wow. It's the first time in like 10 years I can empty my beer can. So he was able to tip his head much further and empty the can. No self-respecting beer drinker in the South would dare use a straw, right? So whether it was a can, a bottle, or a glass, he was wasting that much beer every time. So now he can tilt his head. He forgot all about being able to drive. He could tilt his head now and finish his beer, right? So I knew chiropractic would improve performance. But now I knew what chiropractic, that's relevant to this man Grady, even though it's drinking beer. right? Chiropractic, contributing to alcoholism. Right? Getting the most out of life, but that was very relevant to him. Right? So think about helping people get from here to here. What are the things we could say, visit to visit, that would help them go in that direction? We got an idea how to help people. You could think ADIO, above, down, inside, out. You could think outside in, below, up. You could think vitalistically. You could think mechanistically. Still thinking about how to help people. That's critical thinking. That's a huge struggle for people just coming into chiropractic school, because they're taught in a mechanistic world. When they study biology, what does biology mean?
Study of life.
The study of life. And when they're in college, and they're getting, most of them have science degrees, and they've taken college biology, and biology is the study of life. Chapter 1 in their textbook, as you would expect, defines life, because after all, biology is
Study of life.
the study of life. And the definition of life is, well, here are the 5 signs of life: elimination, assimilation, growth, reproduction, adaptation. Same as principle number 18 for us. But I'm looking through their freshman texts, chapter 1, and said, okay, well, the signs of life are not the definition of life. So I looked down a couple more paragraphs. Life, it says, in the college textbook, is more than the sum of its parts. Innate intelligence. Didn't say it, but more than the sum of its parts. And then I quick rifled through the table of contents, and I'm looking through the rest of the book, 28 chapters long. The next 27 chapters were all about parts. Life is more than the sum of its parts, but the whole book is about parts. So, am I surprised that they're coming to us thinking mechanistically? No. That's why they're coming to us thinking mechanistically, because that's all that's been thrown to them. So if you come to them with a vitalistic method, you are starting that process of critical thinking for them. So don't be afraid to ask them questions. So deductive reasoning. Stevenson, Article 12, Strauss, his first chiropractic philosophy text, 1991, discusses it on page 33, 34. So I'll give you both references. Even though that says 1948, probably still the same in the 27 text, which was his original text. So, to think critically, think red. Recognize what the assumption is. Evaluate the argument, get your conclusion. Now, the reason why I like this slide when I found this picture is because what do we start deductive thinking with?
Assumptions.
An assumption. Medicine has an assumption. Chiropractic has an assumption. Conservatives have an assumption. Liberals have an assumption. So whatever the realm of life is, look at what the underlying assumption is to see what the argument is, to see where it's coming from. And that'll help us to draw conclusions. So we only need our mind to think deductively. We don't need a lab. No test tubes, no scales, no rulers. What's our assumption? A self-evident truth. What's the self-evident truth about this
I exist.
to Darwin? What's the assumption? Humans, accidental mutations, random mutations created this. If you study it, that's what it is. What's the chiropractic assumption?
Intelligent creation.
There's intelligence behind this. Two different assumptions. Just understand what the assumptions are when we go through the logic that's going to follow. logic, pure reasoning are substitutes for deductive thinking. Now, inductive thinking will also require logic, but this is called pure logic or pure reasoning. What assumptions can we make about the world, the universe, or the solar system? Just for time's sake, let me give you two choices, A and B. The world, the universe, the solar system are disorganized, A, or B, organized.
Organized.
Right? I would say organized. Some of my students would say disorganized. And I said, okay, give me your evidence that leads you to say that. On what are you basing that? Well, we study this law of entropy in science. And things fall apart. And if they're organized, why are they falling apart? So then I say, well, when they fall apart and they're at a lower energy state, is that not highly organized? Well, yeah. I said, okay, just part of a bigger cycle. When the tree rots and goes back to its elemental form, it's decaying, now it's a part of creating new life someplace else. So if you take back and take the 5-mile view, that's part of a bigger organization. But when I was right up here, it looked like it was decaying and falling apart. Right, that old story we heard about which part of the elephant is the blind man touching. Take the 5-mile view and see if that organization is there or not. Okay? Based on what would you say the solar system, universal world is organized? Because this is going to be important in a few minutes. Based on what would you say that? 'Cause I heard some,
Our study of it.
I heard some people say that. Observation, what'd you observe?
Solar cycles, lunar cycles,
Lunar cycles,
stellar cycles.
okay? Star cycles, solar cycles. I can look at my calendar, it says tonight's gonna be a full moon. I go on my back porch, it gets dark, sure enough, the moon's full. Science predicted it, but science didn't make it happen.
No.
Go to the beach, what's on the refrigerator door?
Tide.
The tide charts. Look at the tide chart, go out to the beach, dang, if that thing isn't right. Is that pretty ordered? When does summer come?
After spring, before.
Always after spring, never before it. Although here in South Carolina, we get teased.
Christmas was spring this year.
Yeah, right? But you know, so there's lots of that. So what assumption can you make about the human body? You're telling me your assumption about the world, universe, solar system is that it's organized. What's your assumption here?
It's organized to a high degree.
Highly organized. That's logical if it exists in a highly organized universe. That's not logical if the universe is disorganized. I prefer logic. What assumptions could we make about symptoms?
They're normal.
Natural.
They're normal, they're natural. Could they be part of an organization?
Yes.
Might that be why the chiropractor takes a different view of symptoms than the allopathic MD?
Mm-hmm.
Or the homeopathic MD for that matter? So our major premise are a priori statement, an assumption about some aspect of reality. Cannot really be proven. Right? You really can't prove what Darwin said about how things got started, and we can't prove that God created it. But both of them could be beginning points.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them could be major assumptions, a priori statements. The a priori statement, the major premise, is where we start deductive reasoning and we get there one of two routes. You already gave me this one for why you thought the universe, the solar system was highly organized. You observed it. You see it. That's how you were able to use inductive to arrive at a deductive premise. You see how they have to go together? We are not religious fanatics. We blend inductive and deductive. Or, you could say, because of my faith, I believe that. If you believe God created the universe, God would only make something organized, you could say, I believe that because of my faith. Okay? How do you think most people would say the world, the universe, the solar system is organized? By this or by this?
Inductive reasoning.
I would bet most people would say through induction. Because people look at the world and they see it. And they're taught that if they see it, it's real. The sun always rises in the east and sets in the west. Creates a lot of accidents on Reedville Road, because you drive right into the sun. A minor premise has to relate to the major premise so that you can get truth out of it. The universe is an organized place. Humans are in the universe. Am I connected to my major premise? Yes, I have universe in both statements. Okay? Bill is a human. You may debate that. Okay? Am I connected? Yes, I have human in those two statements. What's my conclusion?
Bill is organized.
Bill is organized. Innately.
Yeah.
Right? Not my desk, not my garage. Okay? The science that investigates principles governing correct, reliable inference. Logic is a science. I'm a father. Myron will remember this from when he taught philosophy. What's your conclusion? If I told you I'm a father,
You're a man.
I'm a man,
You're married.
I have at least one child, and maybe not married, that would be good. Okay? Could you be wrong?
Yep.
How?
Be a priest.
Could be a priest. That's called father. Could have no children. What do we have to do?
Define
Assume.
terms.
We have to define our terms. And when words have meaning, what is that called? Semantics. Semantics means words have meaning. But yet when somebody says, oh, that's just semantics, that comes with negative baggage, doesn't it? And actually, for me, I love semantics. You said that word, and that word has a meaning, so what are you saying it for? I want to, that's just the way my mind works. Let's dig down through that. 100% certain conclusions, confidence in our reasoning, but we could be wrong, just like we pointed out. And if we find out we're wrong, we better go back and clean it up. Would you like to be 100% certain that the person that came in your office needed you and that when they left, they were better off? I would. That comes down to me knowing if they're subluxated, and my post-check knowing they're not when they leave. Right? I base that on deductive science. I'm using induction in there. Okay. Make some observations about a chair. Use your powers of inductive observation.
Seat.
There's a cushion.
Solid.
Solid,
Furniture.
arms,
Right.
looks like furniture,
Backrest.
backrest.
It's not a desk.
How many legs?
At least 4.
4 legs on there. You make inductive observations. Okay? Major premise. Major premise about the chair. We just said inductive can lead to a deductive premise. You gave me inductive observations, give me a deductive premise. A priori.
chairs are pieces of furniture used to sit on and have four legs, a seat in the back.
Okay, what if that's a conclusion from our inductive reasoning? Give me some intelligence statement about intelligence. Could you say there's a universal intelligence in all matter, giving it its properties and actions, maintaining it in existence?
So,
Yeah, something's holding those atomic bonds together in that metal and in that material. Could you make a major premise about there's educated intelligence in that chair?
Yeah.
Absolutely. How about the cell phone? Same thing?
Yep.
Is there educated intelligence in this cell phone based on what?
Laws. Observation.
Observations, seeing the laws come to play. Communication, lights flash on and off, sounds come out, typing, data is recorded, stored. Observations about a tree. What would be different about after your observations? The roots grow down, the branches grow up, the leaves are green until the fall, they turn colors, they fall off.
It's alive.
It's alive. So we're not gonna go here with an educated intelligence premise, are we? But we can still come in here with there's an intelligence in that tree. I see it through the organization of the tree. Same way with the human being. People get that there's educated intelligence in the chair. Or as Reggie would talk about, the watch on the sidewalk. Which is actually, who was that attributed to from old timey? Paleo? Not the diet. Everybody's doing the paleo diet these days, but this guy's name starts with P-A-L or something, right? And he's the one that, Pareto? No, that's different. He's the one that Reggie never gave him credit for. Obviously, Reggie never did. He kind of just said stuff. But he got it from somebody else. He said, you're walking down a sidewalk, you see a wristwatch. You don't think that that accidentally came together. You know there had to be something educated behind it. Same way as the human body. There has to be something intelligent behind it, right? So that's how we get to our premise. If you want 100% certainty, you gotta look at these two players. Is your premise solid? Is your reasoning sound, spotless? That's what we do for each other. Hey Chris, I'm thinking about this, check my reasoning on this. Am I good? You know, bounce it around with people. Is this good? Am I on the right path? All humans have brown eyes. That's my a priori statement. I looked at all my in-laws, who were Filipinos. Every one of them had brown eyes. That's my observation. They're human beings. My a priori statement is all humans have brown eyes. John is a human. What's my conclusion?
John's got brown eyes.
John has brown eyes. Do I have confidence in my reasoning? Well, what if I meet John and they don't have brown eyes? I got a problem. Either they're not human,
I'm not Filipino.
not Filipino, either they're not human or my premise was wrong. Right? My minor premise was connected, but maybe my major premise was wrong. If I keep meeting brown-eyed people, boy, I'm confident. I'm good. But then I met that person with blue eyes or green eyes. All right, I gotta go back and change that. That wasn't good. Either way, I'm discovering truth. My knowledge base is growing.
So isn't this one of the areas where medicine kind of falls apart because they might have a major premise, they have some sort of inconsistent truth to it, but they keep going.
Right.
And they don't fix the new truth or make a new premise.
Yes, and we might have that in chiropractic as well.
Sure.
Because we've adopted that same kind of thinking. A misaligned vertebra occludes an opening. If an occluded opening puts
Pressure,
pressure on a nerve, and if a nerve under
pressure,
pressure causes
interference.
pain, then a misaligned vertebra causes
Okay.
pain. This is what the public thinks. This is what the bulk of chiropractors think, because that is what most chiropractic colleges teach. That's logical to them. That flows to them. That's like brown eyes. Because you walked into the chiropractor's office one day, and he found a subluxation, or she found a subluxation in your spine, and yet you had no pain. Well, dang, now what do I do? Or you came in with pain, and I didn't find subluxation. Well, dang, now what do I do? I got a problem with my reasoning. I have a problem with my deductive reasoning. Misaligned vertebra occludes an opening. If an occluded opening puts
Pressure,
pressure on a nerve under
pressure,
pressure doesn't
function.
function properly. Well, that's different. Now I'm not locked into pain. Now I might be able to make that relevant to you in another way. Then a misaligned vertebra causes
Malfunction.
Malfunction. All the above? I'm confused.
It causes
Malfunction.
improper function, which might be painful. To the devil's advocate in the corner. Now, how many times do we say that, John, and they still think in pain, right? They're still thinking pain, because we gotta keep repeating it. Heck, that's why everybody took Irene Gold board reviews, just to keep repeating the stuff, because we know repetition helps. They're not gonna get it the first time you tell them. Some may, very few will. We gotta keep repeating it. We gotta keep trying to teach them.
Well, it was interesting, a patient today who was under care with me for a long time, she moved to Arizona, got under care with the best chiropractor she can find. She came back and she said, they'd been checking her for a while, and after a while, she said, how come you never checked my neck? And I said, well, you never complained that your neck hurt. And she said to them, having been under my care, she said, did it ever occur to you that it was possible that subluxation and have no pain? Did you ever think of that?
She said the S word.
She did. She said, did you ever think of that? That that's possible.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty bad. The patients are saying that.
Mhm.
Record.
That's right. I had confidence in the pain scenario until that person came in with no pain or their pain didn't go away.
That's right.
But by golly, I know I'm finding subluxation and you telling me you're asymptomatic, so my logic is off someplace. So we can go back and check that, because if you're positive that they have subluxation, then they're suffering at some level, although they can't detect it.
It's always good to reinforce if you're a full spine guy, perhaps, and they just happen to say, oh, my neck today or something. And if you find a L4, don't have any pain here, do you? Or you're still subluxated here as well. That's why I check full spine or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can educate them every day like that. A lot.
Doc, I got, you know what? I'm gonna check your whole spine.
Right.
Just because you point down here doesn't mean the problem's not up here. I'm checking you there too. That's first visit conversation for me. We're gonna just check your spine, because a lot of times the tension going on up here is what's causing down here. Just a little clear there?
I don't even address it in my office. They're
Yeah.
not allowed to say one symptom to me the first visit.
Okay.
I don't wanna hear it.
Okay.
And then I explain why.
Mhm. I listen and then explain why I'm not doing that. Different approach. The ancient Greeks didn't have test tubes. They relied on the power of their mind. Deduction was superior. At some point around the 1500s is when induction started to grow, because the Catholic Church maintained control over science and religion. And the science people, who were still very religious, said, no, we want to just do some different kinds of research, and that's when you started to see the pulling apart. And that's when mechanisms started to grow, which would be induction. There we go. Universal intelligence in all matter continually gives to it all of its properties and actions, thus maintaining it in existence. Principle number 1, out of the 33 principles, our major premise. Do you accept the major premise of chiropractic? I don't need to know the answer. All of you need to know it individually. How, if the answer is yes, how do you accept it? Review, there are 2 ways to accept any premise. One is faith, the other is inductive observation. So, if you accept this, understand how you accept it. Can you practice chiropractic without accepting the major premise? My license says chiropractor. My diploma says chiropractor. I'm doing something in my office. I don't agree with the major premise, but I'm a chiropractor, so my answer is yes. Somebody else might say, if you don't accept the major premise, then there's no way you could possibly be doing chiropractic. Well, then what am I doing? I don't know, but you're not doing chiropractic, would be that argument. Right? I'm not here to judge anybody, I'm just asking the question. Not necessarily you, but when I'm trying to teach students how to think critically. What is the danger, I'm putting that in quotes, okay, because I might see it as dangerous in my worldview, everybody might not agree. What's the danger in practicing chiropractic without that premise? Without our major premise? If you don't think the body's intelligent, what might you do?
Take credit.
You might try to control it from the outside in. I view that as dangerous. If you accept the major premise, you're more willing to let it unfold from the inside out. I see that as a huge difference. Is it good that the major premise of chiropractic has never changed?
Yes.
I ask that question because it's levied against us by our chiropractic brethren. You chiropractic religious nuts, right? You cultists, you've never even changed your premise. You never get off that philosophy thing of universal intelligence. So it's used against us as a negative. Is that a good thing that it never changed?
That's correct.
Dwayne, why is it good?
That means it was probably right.
Okay.
I mean,
We've never
you know,
found anything to contradict it.
Never found anything to contradict it. Stevenson wrote about what the Palmers were thinking in 1927. That encapsulated what they were thinking up till that point. DD and BJ. Okay? Strauss thought through it pretty good, wrote another book in 1991. He didn't see a need to change it. Okay? Koch, early 2000s, thought it through time and time again, all different angles. He didn't see a need to change it. He introduced the use of the word consciousness, but he really didn't change the idea. Okay? Sinnott comes along in 2011 maybe, with his chiropractic philosophy book. He looks at it from all different angles. He doesn't see a need to change it. And those are the only people who've written chiropractic philosophy books. So who is it that's saying it should have changed? People who've never even studied it. Okay? What changes have taken place in science? Think science big picture since 1895.
technology.
Technology. You got computers. Put a man on the moon. Came up with plastics. We can see things we didn't used to be able to see.
Measure things you couldn't measure.
Measure things we couldn't use to measure. We got this darn electron microscope that can see things vibrating, right? And I might want to point out that that was in our simple cycle, right? The impressions on the afferent side are vibrations even before the electron microscope picked that up,
Yeah, yeah.
right? What changes have taken place in medicine since 1895?
Can't categorize them.
Did they come up with drugs?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Have they made the drugs theoretically better? They would like to claim yes. Have they been able to do a heart transplant? Yeah. Have they been able to put a hip in somebody whose hip was all degenerated and falling apart? Yeah. Can they give somebody a kidney transplant and keeping them alive? Yeah. They've got changes in their science. Their premise hasn't changed either since 1895. They're still from the outside in, trying to help you work better from their frame of reference. Their science has changed, but their philosophy hasn't. Has our science changed?
Yes.
Yeah. We're a lot more precise in our technique, hopefully. It is in how it's taught, maybe not practiced. Right? X-ray came around at that time, but we're analyzing the X-rays differently. We had the video X-rays there. We got the heat reading instruments, which weren't there in the beginning. All other different kinds of things have taken place in our analysis. So deductive takes us from the general or the vague to the specific. Okay. Did you want a break?
Is this a good time to break?
Actually, at the end of deductive, coming up. Big picture, general, the universe is intelligent. Smaller picture, living things are intelligent. Smaller picture, interference in that living thing can disturb coordination. Smaller picture, subluxation could cause that interference. Big assumption, very specific focus, the subluxation. Interferes with that intelligent expression in living things. That's why we're a deductive science. That's why I think everybody here should get checked no matter how you're feeling today. All men are mortal. It's my premise. Socrates is a man. Am I connected to the first?
Yep.
Yes. Conclusion, Socrates is mortal. Yeah, good conclusion. He's gonna die. He's not gonna live forever. We went through his funeral. We discovered new things. Men are mortal. Deductive reasoning begins general and specific. I just went through what that is for chiropractic. A bad premise. Living things are organized by their DNA and maintained in existence by the DNA. It's my premise. You know why? Because Watson and Crick discovered how it looks. And that fit in with Darwin's view. So now we know what makes you tick. It's the DNA. It's what brings you life. Dang. Until I watched that cop show and they measured the DNA on the dead guy.
He's not dead.
So if the DNA is keeping the dead guy alive, why is the dead guy dead?
He's not dead.
He must still be alive. Or dead. That would be a bad premise. Back of a bus in New Zealand. Not in pain, go to your chiropractor. Why would I take my family? Maybe there's something different going on there. Billboards in South Carolina put up by the PSCA over a period of 2 years. 3 billboards on 3 major highways across the state at $950 a month each. Just to put out something different. On what basis would we say that getting adjusted could maximize your performance?
Both deductive and inductive.
Based on deductive reasoning, which then leads to inductive experiences again. The number, that number is no longer any good. Our number's different, but most of the people that called up for that when we ran that billboard campaign were chiropractors, thanking us for putting out a different message. I never saw them again. They might just be passing through on their way to Florida. But they said, I'm a chiropractor, love your billboard. All right, let's break here. We got inductive coming up next. I wish I had water or something. Observation, experience, experiments.
Alright, there you go.
We're familiar with this. This is what we've all done since high school science, if not earlier. We certainly did it in undergrad. We certainly even have done it in chiropractic school and in practice since. Okay? You're doing this all the time with people in your practice when you're checking them. The basis for empiricism is inductive reasoning, right? Empiricism is the base. Learning through the senses. When you palpate somebody, that's inductive evidence. When you look at an x-ray, that's inductive evidence. When you're checking a range of motion, that's inductive evidence. You're using your senses to learn about the spine. We do use inductive science. Okay. Thought I had something else in there. Observation of fact, the leaves are turning colors this autumn. I observed that last fall. The leaves have turned different colors every autumn that has been recorded. Conclusion, the leaves will turn different colors fall of 2017. Is that measurable?
Yes.
Yes. Conclusion, the leaves will turn different colors every autumn.
Reasonable.
Reasonable. Inductive science, is it measurable?
You can keep track of it.
When you die,
It'll still go on.
are you as sure that somebody will continue to measure it?
Oh, there is somebody out there that will.
Doesn't matter.
Yes, but in the realm of inductive science, when you go from next year to all years, your probability is coming down, because you can't guarantee that it will be measured. And it has to be measured to be real.
Pattern's great.
So we're expecting to be alive in the fall, and yes, I'm gonna measure it in October. But the next 100 Octobers, I don't think I'm gonna be around. When we measure it, what does a conclusion in science lead us to?
Hypothesis.
A new hypothesis, a new series of experimentation, a new conclusion, another piece to the puzzle. And when we get a bunch of pieces in the jigsaw puzzle, we start to see the picture of life. We could inductively look at what nerve compression in the IVF is doing. We got studies about that. We could look inductively at what cord pressure does, not in the IVF, but in the neural canal, and that gives us a few more pictures. Right? We can keep doing science experiments and eventually see more and more of the picture. The bigger or the better picture we have, the higher our probability goes. Probability is important in inductive science. Certainty is important in deductive science. There's a difference. So give me an observation of fact regarding the human body today. Got a pulse. Observation of fact regarding your body in the past.
I had a pulse.
I remember taking my pulse a couple days ago. I remember breathing heavy when I was bicycling up a hill. Right? Make some observation of facts. I remember eliminating waste from my body. Okay? Testable hypothesis. Give me a conclusion that would be a testable hypothesis.
Consistently have a pulse. I consistently have a pulse.
Okay, I will consistently have a pulse. So you're gonna have to, in a science experiment, you have to define the length of your study. You can't say forever. The next 30 days, the next 60 days. Okay? What about a conclusion from induction, right? Because induction feeds deduction, that might lead me to a bigger premise.
Well, because we might observe that people inductively that people, and then see people who are dead don't have a pulse, so we might conclude inductively that living people have a pulse.
Okay? The deducting premise could be living people have a pulse. You could do the same thing going through this with your chiropractic practice. For instance, you have inductive experience of the things that you're most likely, maybe not 100%, but there's a high probability that when you adjust a right atlas, this is what you found. Whatever those markers are for you. That might not be 100% of the cases, but it's a lot of the cases. Right, so there's the outcome of your experiment, that's your conclusion. You could then make a premise about these findings point to an atlas. Two types of inductive reasoning: informal, early in life, learn from your experience, from what you see, cause you to make categories, causes you to stereotype people. I like the, yeah, Terry.
Inductively, all our analysis, all the specific pieces of our analysis create a pattern that we use to deductively come up with a time of subluxation.
Yeah, your inductive pieces paint a picture, so your conclusion is this subluxation, this adjustment.
And that's a deductive conclusion.
That's an inductive conclusion. Now, each piece of the puzzle makes that a higher probability. Now your premise is interference at the atlas is gonna look like this in everybody. Did you test it in everybody? No, you have experience on, let's say, 100 people. Okay?
Okay.
Deduction would start big and say, if you got an atlas subluxation, this is what I'm gonna find in every person. That's deduction, because you're starting real general. Right? Good
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
I moved down to Spartanburg to study chiropractic from New York. Okay? People put me in a category. People put me in a stereotype. People from New York, you gotta look out for them. They're wise guys. They'll cheat you, they'll steal, you know? Hold your wallet. I've had that in other places that I went. I could be from the far reaches of the Adirondack Mountains in New York, but if you say you're from New York, they think New York City, which is where I was from, but I didn't tell people that. All right? My experience is, at the age of 4 years old, I put my fingers through the fence of the neighbor, between our house and the neighbor's house, and the dog bit my fingers. That's my experience. What could my conclusion be as a 4-year-old?
Fences are bad.
Not too bad.
All dogs bite. Don't put your fingers through the fence. Right? So that's inductive learning early on. That's early on inductive learning. They're not controlled experiments. Or we could do it formally, in which case we want to limit our variables, it wants to be reproducible. One specific question is asked, you can't ask too many questions. All the stuff you learn in science. And that's where our chiropractic research should go. Should be these things, but it should be in a chiropractic context, not a medical allopathic context.
Yep.
That's going to be huge. And we can do our research with that model in our own field. Right? This one says, conclusion can only be based on the data that you collect, not what you think it should be. Inductive reasoning is not like deductive. In deductive, we have to define our terms. Inductive, not really. It's not as important. So, what is chiropractic? I went for chiropractic care because the lady's sign said chiropractor. What did they do? Well, I got a massage, I got some acupuncture, and I left with some nutritional supplements. And that's what chiropractic is, because that's what the sign said. It's a chiropractic office. So if we read a study, and I've been on review boards, right, for peer-reviewed articles, and the conclusion was chiropractic care contributed to this improving in their life, and my feedback was they didn't say what the chiropractor did. Actually, they did. They said they adjusted, and they did massage, and they did nutrition. You can't base your conclusion on 3 things. What are you saying helped? Just, and I'm not picking philosophical bones here, but that's not good science. Okay? What do you mean by health? Feeling good? Better functioning? Total balance and ease? Coordination? That could mean different things. What do you mean chiropractic gets results? Does that mean I'm gonna feel better? Does that mean I leave without interference? What do you mean by results? So we have to make sure that we're trying to narrow that down, because inductive reasoning doesn't lend itself to that. Deductive reasoning requires it. You can do it here, but you gotta make sure that you do it. We begin with a specific question. What can chiropractic do for low back pain in Garrett? Very specific question. What can it do for headaches in Duane? And we end with a general conclusion. If it helped Felicia's headaches, what's my conclusion?
It'd be beneficial for all headaches.
It helped everybody with a headache. Be a legitimate conclusion. But science would say you gotta have a big enough sample in order to make that conclusion. Okay? Inductive reasoning goes from the specific to the general. Deductive didn't. So I have a specific test. I come up with a general conclusion. I go even more general and make a priori assumption of deductive thinking. The more we separate ourselves from nature, the more unsettled we become, right? That's the human race right now with healthcare. Getting detached from nature. So, before I do some examples, let's look at pluses and minuses. Oh, darn. Which program did you download?
The one you sent me.
Yeah, the one I sent you was the smaller one because it wouldn't, was too big with my video clips. Can you put the other one in real quick?
Yeah, tell a story or a joke or
Can you
something.
see a part?
I had some good video clips.
You always have that.
You'll like this one,
I always like.
What'd you do with the stick? Take it?
probably, because I don't
Is it in
lose
your
it.
pocket again?
Yeah, it wouldn't send, so I deleted the videos and then it went popped right over to you.
Oh, come on.
Inductive reasoning, when I was at Texaco Oil in my life before chiropractic school, one of the things in the early '80s that the oil industry was working on was keeping the bosses out of jail, okay? So a lot of the studies were done on the safety of the oil products, not just Texaco, but the whole industry. So we had hired a subcontractor to paint, we designed the experiment, used motor oil on laboratory mice for 30 days. Another group was 60 days, another group was 90 days. As a result of those experiments, the conclusion was used motor oil would cause skin cancer. And then you see the labeling that comes about that this product is carcinogenic, blah, blah, blah. So think of the logic here though. It makes sense and it doesn't at the same time. Number one, they never washed the used motor oil off the mice. They just kept painting it on the mice, as though the guy changing his oil never cleans his hands. Right? And the conclusion was used motor oil causes skin cancer. But where's the warning label? On the new motor oil
Right.
container. It should be on the oil pan under the car, because that's what the guy's looking at, that's where the bad stuff's coming out.
Oh, I need to turn up.
You got speakers?
Yeah, hold on.
Want me to hold the microphone up to it?
There's no microphone.
I'm trouble.
You are.
We have sound?
Can you just hum along to it?
I know this one.
I know this one.
You know this
Oh,
one.
I know this one. Greatest movies of all time.
Scary.
They found a witch. Listen to the reasoning. Observation. Get the logic?
So
Keep going.
Wood floats, the duck floats. So if she weighs the same as the duck, then she must be made of wood, and wood burns like witches. It makes perfect sense.
And they were right too, though, in the movie.
Yeah.
What happens to her?
Okay.
Yes, she was.
Keep us in
What was the name of that
suspense.
movie? I've never seen it.
What's the name of the movie?
Monty Python's Search for the Holy Grail.
Search for the Holy Grail.
I missed that one.
Allow us to reason beyond the limits of our experience. Deduction is what allows you to think about innate intelligence. Deductive reasoning is what allows you to think about God, things immaterial. The major premise says it gives matter all of its properties and actions, which means just because science doesn't know it, doesn't mean it's not there. Our principles said that the innate intelligence organized all the parts for mutual benefit even before science knew what the appendix did. Even before science knew what a lot of other parts do. The axoplasm fluid in the nerve. It wasn't discovered until the 1960s. Right? A woman is told, you're past your childbearing years. Why not have the hysterectomy just so you don't get cancer maybe? Well, just because science doesn't know what the post-birthing years use of the uterus is, doesn't mean it doesn't have a use. There may be something else that the body's intelligence is still doing with it. So deduction helps us to reason even things we might not know. right? We know more today than yesterday, maybe not as much as tomorrow. We can get beyond the material universe, we can get into the abstract universe. We have high degree of confidence, that's an advantage, we learn. Limits. Bad premise. We covered a couple of examples of that. Bad logic. Okay, a couple of examples of that. All stars are glowing balls of fusing hydrogen. That's my premise. Okay? J-Lo is a star.
Close.
What's my conclusion?
She's hot.
Glowing ball.
J-Lo is a glowing ball of fusing hydrogen. Not for date night, Chris.
That's true.
Okay? What's the problem? We come back to semantics, don't we? I have to define what I mean by star. It's important. Induction. People love this, students love this, chiropractors love this because I measured it. How do you know that's where the problem is? Look at the x-ray, it's right there. As opposed to, my experience tells me it's here. Right? That's still induction, experience, either way, the x-ray or touching it. Reproducible. Somebody else has to be able to find what you find using the same map. Self-testing, we can reveal errors, we grow in our knowledge. Here's a guy growing in his knowledge.
I love this.
See that?
Wait a minute.
I call that even city boys have a nervous system. Okay? The electric fence out in the farm. He had no idea. Induction has limits. Incomplete data. So, my child is running a fever. The medical doctor, or the neighbor, or culture says to give the child Tylenol or something, children's Tylenol to lower the fever. Has that been tested on your child? No. Complete data would mean what? Tested on everybody. So if you're giving your child something that hasn't been tested on them, what does that make them now?
Experiment.
An experiment, the guinea pig. They become part of the experiment, okay? We'll never have all the data. So everybody that had a headache left here without a headache, that doesn't mean you're gonna leave if you got a headache, and when you get adjusted, it's gonna be gone. That's why we don't promise it. Doesn't make sense. Increased amount of data leads to increased certainty, but you can never get to 100%. That's what makes inductive reasoning a probability game. So the higher the probability of success, the better off we are, the more confident we are in this. But understand you will never get to 100% because you haven't measured it on everybody. You haven't measured everything, just plain and simple. Observation is fallible. Could you read the x-ray wrong? That's why you want to study with a master. Could you palpate wrong? That's why you want to study with a master. Could you do the graph wrong or interpret it wrong? Yes. That's why we want to ongoing learning with chiropractic. Where students would get that, but they're too burdened down with national board stuff. And their answer is, I can do that when I graduate, but I got to get the boards. I'm biased.
Really?
I don't mind telling you. The difference between me and the scientist is I'm omitting it. He's got a bias too, but a lot of times they don't mention it.
Depends on where the money's coming from.
No, there's the bias, right?
Big time.
You can play games with statistics. Statisticians don't agree on the best way to analyze data. Your logic only has to be 51%. That doesn't work in deduction. Deduction, we want 100% logic, 100% certainty, not a little bit better than flipping a coin. You cannot apply inductive science to the immaterial. how do you measure the heart of an athlete? And I have that in quotes because I'm not talking about the physiological heart. On paper, this guy is supposed to whoop up on this guy, but he doesn't. The 1969 Mets were not supposed to beat the Orioles. On paper, there was no way, but the chemistry came together. That's what the whole Rocky movie series is about, right? What about that element of time? Instantaneous is still an amount of time. Eons is an amount of time. We say principle number 6, nature needs time, and we don't know how much time. Billy Bob's low back pain is cured by chiropractic adjustments. That's what?
Observation.
It's an observation, an inductive observation. Bobby May's low back pain is cured by chiropractic adjustments.
Independent observation.
Same, inductive observation. Norma Jean's low back pain is cured by chiropractic. Inductive observation. Conclusion.
Gotta have 2 names to be cured.
Chiropractic adjustments cure low back pain. Are we not surprised that that's what the public and a lot of chiropractors think? Yes. Okay? That's one piece of an inductive puzzle. One piece. Ralph's headaches are cured by chiropractic adjustments. Fran's sinusitis is cured by chiropractic adjustments. Carl's blood pressure problems are cured by chiropractic adjustments. What's your conclusion?
Ralph, Fran, and Carl.
Chiropractic gets sick people well. Did we not hear that advertised by the Palmers in the early days? Are we understanding why? Yes, they had inductive experience. Take your inductive experience, you got more puzzle pieces now. You got low back pain, headache, sinusitis, blood pressure, you got 4 conditions in your puzzle now. Your conclusion is chiropractic gets sick people well. Now go big.
Ralph, Fran, and Carl went to the chiropractor.
Now go big. What's the deductive premise?
All sick people should see a chiropractor.
All sick people should see a chiropractor. Or chiropractors tap into a natural healing process. There's a bunch of things we could say. But we always get there from our inductive conclusions. So if we walk away from tonight with nothing else, understand that for us as chiropractors, induction and deduction are like this.
Yes.
We're based in deduction, but we go together like that. We're doing our inductive homework. Every time a person gets on the bench, you're doing induction. And it feeds into your deductive. And then we gotta learn how to ask research projects based in our model to come up with these new hypotheses. So if a person is a goods consumer, he'll go for the deluxe model and move on to a new life of health. If he is not a good consumer, he'll settle for the quick fix. What's the quick fix? For both the patient and the chiropractor. You feel better, hey, great, you're dismissed. See you when you're hurt. What's the deluxe model?
Ongoing regular chiropractic care from cradle to grave.
Teach them about getting it checked regardless of how they feel. What schedule? I don't know. Get to know that patient's spine. Come up with the schedule that you think is best for that person. Felicia wrote a paper about that or something. I think that's it. Questions? No, almost just on time.